money doesn't have emotion. Now, it can create emotion, but money itself doesn't have emotion. So, really get to know who you are with money. How does it help you? Does it serve you or does it control you? The more knowledge you have, the less emotion you're going to have. Usually, when something happens, it's like, oh man, I got to pay that bill. It's a very quick emotion, and you step out of it to then make your decisions. Just go be positive with your money. Start small steps and make it what you want it to be.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Vibrant Soul Society, The Conversations. I'm your host, Baba Sam, the Miracle Man. Our mission for the show is to help you discover that you are greater than your thoughts. Then beyond your thoughts is our true essence, our soul, our spirit, our consciousness, whatever you wish to call it. And I bring forward various guests to inspire us, give us wisdom, and tips on how to live a better life. So I'm really excited to talk about finances today. A very bright, vibrant soul here. Dalene, welcome to the conversations.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and contribute to, some positive thoughts.
Yeah, that's great.
I am Dalene Higgins. I am a financial coach. I've been in this particular space for 2.5 years, working with women and couples and helping them organize their day-to-day finances. And when I say that, there's a lot behind that, from not only getting things organized on paper or flowing from bank account to bank account, but also what our minds are doing each and every time we do that. I worked for 32 years in government and was able to retire at the age of 50. Decided I wasn't destined to sit in a recliner all day. And so I found the field of financial coaching. My position prior to retiring was a budget manager. And it's basically what I did was helped law enforcement officials learn how to budget taxpayer dollars. So I was their support in helping them. And when I retired and reached my dream of retiring early, I thought, wow, this is such a great feeling. And I want others to be able to achieve their dream, whatever that was with finances, to be able to not let money hold them back anymore.
That's such an important topic, money holding us back, because a lot of people have these beliefs around their finances. What are some of those beliefs that you're seeing in the people that you work with?
Yeah. So a lot of them that I'm working with are of the age where scarcity seems to hold them back. And when they're scarcity, they're almost hoarding their money in their savings account. Seeing a large number in their bank account or savings account right where they can get to it, they feel good, they feel safe, but they're not earning as much as they should. They're not letting it flow to where it should be going. And there's been a lot of things that we've unpacked as we've started to work into, you've got to trust the process. It's got to go somewhere else. It'll work better for you. And with one client, we were able to uncover that she had a fear of losing everything. Her parents were entrepreneurs, so she had seen that. And so herself, she was a little bit of both, an entrepreneur and working with a W-2 company. And so we worked that. But then we also had her remembering a fire at the age of 15 that took their home away. And so she had some true fears of losing everything. And so we worked really hard on what would make her feel safe and protected. These beliefs, they really can get you. And if you go far enough back, they started about the age 3. And what I love to have people think about, if you have kids or if you've been around kids, you don't have to have had them, and you're having money conversations of any sort. Typically, if you have a 3 or 4, maybe even a 5-year-old there, you're not going to second guess what you're talking about, what you're sharing about, what you're seeing. And this 3, 4, 5-year-old might also see it. And so they're forming their own ideas, their own opinions as a 3, 4, or 5-year-old would. But when you've got kids that are like 10, 11, 12, you really aren't going to let them hear. So whatever they heard at the age of 3, 4, and 5 is now no longer being discussed to healthily put a, spin on it, not what they saw, but what was actual.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So let's go back to this first thing with the scarcity mindset, the hoarding, because maybe you're seeing this too. If you're like holding on to your last dollar, is that preventing more dollars from coming in?
I agree. To a certain extent, you're
Yeah.
hoarding it. You almost feel like you have enough. And so being able to go out and get more or to allow more to come in or to be free with it, yeah, you become like, okay, well, this is good. And I'm just going to sit here. And once you sit there, you become stagnant and it's not enough, or it kind of begins to fester. Really letting your money flow for yourself, whether that is giving or whether that is you yourself putting it somewhere where it's going to grow in whatever shape or form it needs to. I think that'll allow more to come in to replace what you've taken.
Right, because that's the way I see money. It's just a form of energy, and we want to keep that flow of energy going. So it's really interesting with that client that you had. So a fire at 15 years old really instilled a sense of fear in her, that safety security issue. So how did you reestablish within her that it is safe?
And we just defined for her what those things would be. What is going to make you feel safe? As you look at what you already have, we start there. There's no need to bring in more. Let's find what you've got. And she's like, well, I have a good job. I do have a good business. She had some really good relationships with family and friends. And so just kind of going from there. And I'm like, do you need more to make you feel safe and protected? She just hadn't been spending time thinking about that. Do you have insurance on your place where you're at? She was only renting at the time. And she's like, well, yes. And I'm like, okay, so you're protected in that way. So just trying to identify all of those places where she could definitely increase the protection so that she could hopefully let go of that fear.
Do you do any kind of practices with them, like a mindfulness practice, meditation, journaling? Do you do any of those kind of practices with them?
Journaling, I will suggest for them to, take it to explore more. I don't do any meditation or anything like that. I definitely not my wheelhouse, but just having them really be, gratitude, having that gratitude practice and recognizing what they already have, I think is very important. And then journaling out any additional thoughts and working through those.
Okay, yeah. So, and it's also very interesting you brought up at like 3, 4, and 5 years old, they're freely discussing finances with you because you don't have any opinion on that. But that's really instilling these beliefs.
Yes, yes. So that, as a 3-year-old, they're going to be exposed to the true feeling if it's a heated discussion, between two individuals, spouse or whatever, that 3-year-old gonna see it, feel it, kind of get the gist of what money is. I think a 3-year-old definitely knows what money is. To what degree, probably not accurate. But then them realizing, oh, money can be very hateful and it can cause problems. And if they're not discussed about, like sometimes you have to have these heated discussions to work through them. They don't see the positive side of that.
That's really interesting. So, how do we really flip that around to have a more positive outlook on money?
Yeah. So, as your children grow older, was in a space where it was for trauma women mainly. And I was and working with them and talking with them and having them ask questions. A lot of them were in the place now raising their own children that they didn't want to say, we don't have the money. And I'm like, you've got to say it in a more neutral way. We don't have the money for that. Because once you tell a child, we don't have the money, then they're thinking, oh, is my house going to be taken away? Am I not going to have any food? Or, they go to the extremes and they create these own stories themselves.
Mm,
So instead of going to the flip opposite of what you did as what you experienced as a child, you're just not going to talk about it with your children. Really just try to remain neutral. Let your children know that money should be neutral. It's going to be something that's going to serve you and serve you well as long as you treat it well. And I was very fortunate to have a parent who that's what she did. To be like, hey, mom, I want to have this. And she says, well, let's go see if we can find something just a little bit cheaper. Or, oh, we don't have the money for that right now, maybe in a couple weeks. So it's always this idea of that money wasn't just readily available, but that it would be available. And that planning was really, really important.
mm, yeah, that's really important to define.
Yeah.
And the kids will really get into that fear. Oh, we're not going to be able to feed ourselves. I'm going to lose my bedroom, all of
Yes.
these kind of stories. And that can really instill a lot of fear.
Yes. So another client working with him, he'd found himself in debt very heavily for a third time. And his dad's like, we got to figure this out. So stepping in, working with him, got him on the road, and we were trying to unpack what was going on with him, which I always love to do the practical side because once you start getting your money flowing and working correctly, then the mind is freer to open up. And so I had him do a quiz that I do to figure out a money type. And this is Dr. Brad Klontz who has defined this. We do it, and it gives me two different types that are very opposing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is interesting. So when we got into session, I'm like, okay, what does this mean? What are we looking at? And what it was is he was fighting two different ideas of money, his own
Mm,
and his father's expectations of money. And so, it's like realizing that there's so much that can be placed on you, which I think parents having expectations of their children is okay. But yet, as a child grows up and now becomes a parent of their own, they've got to learn to figure out what is going to work for them. And so, as we worked through this, found out he'd stagnated at his job. He wasn't making what he could have and should have, and he wasn't pursuing that growth opportunity. So once we figured that out and he started going, he's like, "Oh my gosh, I can do this." And I'm like, "Yes, and you're worth the money." And so it's interesting how it just kind of forms itself and shapes itself from these different experiences.
yeah, it's really fascinating how when we see clients all the time, we can see how their beliefs have really shaped them. If they have opposing ideas, then nothing flows.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a state of neutrality where everything cancels out and you're stuck stagnant.
Mm.
So how do we move through that? Like, what's some of the first steps we can be? Because you have a podcast, Wealthy After 40. Everyone wants to be wealthy after 30 with this society. What are
Yes.
some of those things that we can really put in place if you're in the younger generation? So at 40, you can really start thinking about early retirement like yourself.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that we can do to get things right within us?
Yeah. So I like to say that money doesn't have emotion. Now, it can create emotion, but money itself doesn't have emotion. And I think recognizing that your stance with money means what? And I think a lot of people get confused with money and wealth and that they're the same thing. And honestly, they are not. Money buys our wealth, money creates our wealth, but not 100% because family, friends, opportunities doesn't always take that chance of money. So, really get to know who you are with money. How does it help you? Does it serve you or does it control you? And if you find that it's controlling you and that it's never going to be, and you've got to have more, and there's a couple of clients I've had that it's like, if I just find that one thing, it will solve all of my problems. And there is no big fix to money. Even working with me as a coach, I usually do 3 months at a time. That's only 6 or 7 paychecks. To put that into place, that's not very much when you're having 26 paychecks in a year, but starting to explore. So, really start learning who you are with money. Don't be so restrictive on yourself. Don't start, oh, I've got to cut these things out because so and so said, or I've got to do these things or I'll never be rich. No, come back to who you are and what you truly believe. I don't subscribe to the fact that if you stop for a coffee every single day, you're never going to make money. That is not true. However, you cannot do that around every little thing. You have to be choosy, but I love to say, what brings you the most joy? Myself, I'm a fiction reader. I love to read. So I spend a lot of my fun money on books. I don't spend it everywhere else. I have the one little thing. Once you learn what that is, you have your outlet, you can meet your bills, you can make your growth and start flowing. So, say your 30s, you're like, oh, never going to make it. I'm never going to get ahead. Think about where you want to go and what little change you can make today, because those little changes are what's going to add up. And what the one place I would suggest is becoming a saver. I believe learning the habit of saving will basically master all your money skills. If you learn to save, you can pay off debt. If you learn to save, you can retire when you're ready. If you learn to save, you can plan for those emergencies. If you learn to save, you can put your kids through school. If you learn to save, you can leave your legacy, your wealth for generations to come. It's just getting focused on that saving. And that is the biggest struggle I think most people have.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to the saving element because my parents We really didn't have savings. They were always just trying to stay ahead of the
Mhm.
current bill. So they really never had savings. So there's a lot of stuff within myself I had to unwind. And you said something really powerful that I think we need to dive into some more, that money doesn't have emotion, but we sure do have a lot of emotions around
Yes.
money.
Yes. Yes. And I think if you can gain knowledge with money, and I know that's a very, very broad, but start with yourself. The more knowledge you have, the less emotion you're going to have. Usually, when something happens, it's like, oh man, I got to pay that bill. It's a very quick emotion, and you step out of it to then make your decisions. And I think that's what's important is how long does that emotion stay with you when it comes to money? And the shorter that is, the better off you're going to be. But gaining knowledge about anything you can learn money wise, about yourself, about what you're buying. Is that the best for you? Is that the best place? My daughter, she's mid 20s and she's like, we're just trying to figure out this grocery thing. It doesn't matter if I have 10 items in my basket or 15, it's still the same amount. So she's really paying attention to that to try and make sure she's staying on key. But yet, a few days later, she texts me. She says, well, if I stay on budget, I'll pay off my car 3 years early at the end of this year. And so, really just getting diligent about who you are, what you want. I don't like to be restrictive. When clients come to work with me, it's not, okay, we've got to cut things back. You really have to learn who you are. And getting that flow and getting it flowing well will then start, like I said, bringing up those mind thoughts and those exploring. So, emotions, yes, but hopefully you don't hang on to them very long.
Right. And just to be mindful where you're choosing to spend your money as opposed to just blindly spending money everywhere and you're wondering like, where did it go?
Yeah. Yep. I have a recent couple we just wrapped up and they had done well. They'd paid off their house. They're about 5 years from retirement. They really didn't have any other debt. They used credit cards to get the rewards points. But she's like, I have no idea where my money is going. I don't know what it's spent on. And so the very last session, she's like, we just took a little trip. It was expensive. And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, well, we were fine, but now we're more aware of what things are truly costing us. And I think once you get into that point, it's not about, is this something I really want? You can then start lean into the fewer or the bigger and better, whatever direction you want to go.
Right. So I'm not sure if this applies because before we were taping here, you're talking about a checklist that you have, retirement checklist. Does this help you isolate expenses?
To get going, to get prepared for retirement, you have to track your expenses. And it's not when I teach the idea of tracking expenses, I know a lot of people, in the older years are like thinking check register and we're keeping track of it. We're making sure we haven't overspent. And yes, while that's important, it's really about where it's going, who it's going to, what those amounts are. And so the checklist kind of gets you started there and then it points out all the other ways. The biggest gap see people have, regardless if they're just up against retirement or not, is creating those financial stability. I was in a retirement forum and somebody says, how do I buy a car in retirement? And I'm like, really? The same way you buy one now. He was budgeting for his bills and necessities. He wasn't budgeting for anything else. So that thing of emergency funds, savings, right? That's your savings right there is very crucial. It's very important to have that third bucket of money that third bucket actually builds your life. You have necessities, you have to have food, you have your bills, you have to pay people or, bad things are going to happen. But that third bucket is where your power comes. You can create your emergency supply. You can create your retirement early. You can create your traveling for 3 weeks at a time or whatever it is.
And we never talked about where they can find this checklist. Is that on your website?
Yes, it is. So if they go to elevatefinances.us/retire now, they can grab that download. And then I've also laid it out in if you're 10 years or more, or if you're 5 years or less, and then just start walking through those steps and it really spells it out for you.
Yeah, I'm sure there's different goals, different objectives depending where you are. So if you're like in your 20s or 30s, there's different
Yeah.
objectives if you're in your 50s.
Yes, exactly. I know that financial advisors love to say, you've got to save $1 million or you've got to save 2 million. And when you're in your 20s and 30s, that's very helpful. But when you're 45, 50, you know what your expenses are. You know what your likes and dislikes are. You know what your health pretty much is going to be at retirement age. And so really dialing that number down further is much, much easier. And this checklist will help you do that.
Yeah, because if you're in your 50s, 60s, I can't save $5 million now at this point in my life.
Yes, exactly.
So it's interesting name. So Elevate Finances, how did that come to be?
Oh gosh, I know. When I was sitting there, it was in December 3 years ago, was when I started putting my business together. At the time where I lived, we had mountains everywhere. And I'm like, oh, it's kind of like Elevate, I kind of like that. Like people should be elevating their finances. So I think it was just really such a good name for where I was at the time and what I was actually seeing and observing as the different elevations that you can get to. And while some people can reach that 12,000 feet elevation with their finances, others might only be able to make it to 4, and that is fine.
Yeah, because it's really elevating our belief system so we can achieve those goals. It actually
Yes.
works out in a few different ways that you want to elevate your thinking, elevate the way you're thinking about things, and keeping your emotions elevated too when it comes to your finances. So you're more in the positive aspect as opposed to
Yes.
the lack mindset.
Yes.
Is there anything that you wish to discuss that we haven't talked about at this point that's important for our audience?
Yeah. Money, I know, can cause emotions, a lot of different emotions. And the other word, which I love to say, because it really just brings heartache, is budget to people. Setting out a budget, having a budget, that's where I found my power. I still find my power in my budget today when there's like, man, I want to make that happen quicker, or we need to have that happen quicker. If I did not have my budget, I would not know how to navigate making things happen more quickly. You might be just fine living, but still a budget is so very important. But when life throws you a curveball and you have that emotion about whatever it is happening, you can then go through that emotion and then go to your budget and go, how are we going to handle this? How are we going to take care of this? And everything's laid out right there for you, black and white. And you go, oh, well, let's try this and this and this. And it's much easier than having it jumbled in your head and go, I'm not sure. I don't even know where to start. So budgets are powerful.
Yeah, I think where to start there for most people with budgets is like, look at all the streaming services you have. Do you need all of them? A lot of these are auto charge and we don't even think about it.
Yes, I know when I work with clients, and that's what we do first session is I help them create a very simple budget. But then the action step between that session and the next one, I'm like, okay, I need you to write me a bills due date list. So this is just everything that's owed in the month, and they just got to write it down. That helps the flow with it, what I'm teaching them. And I have had clients come back and go, I already canceled 3 things because I don't need it. Or, oh, I'm going to make that adjustment. I can do it better in a different way. It just really opens up the eyes. So yeah, list out your bills. Right there has been some powerful changes within my clients.
Yeah, there's probably some monthly expenses that you forgot about. It's very easy with the credit cards and automatic payments. And you might not even overlook it. Oh, it's only $4 here, $7 here, $5 over here. But if you add that up,
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I love to buy books. I love to read fiction. I do read some nonfiction, but that is where I spend my money. And I have found a couple sites where I can get Kindle books for very, very inexpensive. But as I'm grabbing them, those 99 cents or 2.99 or whatever they are, they're usually not much more than that. And I think, oh my gosh, I spent how much money on books? So it does. It adds up so quick, especially those lower numbers.
there are any last nuggets of wisdom that you want to impart onto the audience?
Just go be positive with your money. Start small steps and make it what you want it to be. Hear all the advice. You've got a whole bunch of other people chatting at you about money. Take what resonates with you most and go with it.
That's really about it, to realize that money itself is neutral and the money doesn't have emotion.
Yes, exactly.
So if people wanted to ask you a question to reach out, how would they do so?
Yeah, they can go visit my website, elevatefinances.us, and there's a contact page on there. They can find me on Instagram. same heading, elevate_finances. Just send me a message through the DM and I'll be happy to answer your question.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining us in the conversation today.
Thank you. It was fun.